Hi, boys and girls. We're back again with Warton and the King of the Skies. Last time we read, I'm going to go back a little bit. Fulton, one of the weasels, stood up and said, "I guess even a construction worker can't help us. Let's go home." Warton swallowed hard and fell in line with the weasels. He dragged his weary feet down the hill, across the log, through the woods, and then down the tunnel, and once again into the big room of the weasel's old home. Frida was just putting a large bowl on the table. Morton was setting a platter beside it. When he heard the weasels come in, he looked towards Warton, high hopes showing all over his face. "Well, Frida," said Floyd, "we still don't have a new home, so you'd better get ready to cook these toads for supper." Morton's mouth dropped. "Listen, stupid," said Frida. "I've already got supper made. We can have the toads tomorrow night. Tonight we're having shrew stew. Take it or leave it." And she left in a huff. As the weasels scattered about, Morton went to Warton's side. "I'm sure you did all you could," he said. "One day just wasn't enough time." Warton shook his head. 100 days wouldn't be enough time, he said. "It's just impossible for those weasels to work together." Frida returned from the kitchen and set a pitcher of pumpkin punch on the table. "Supper's ready!" she shouted. Immediately, the weasels began climbing all over each other as they rushed to their seats. "Hey!" shouted Frank. "The toads should eat too. We want them to stay plump till tomorrow." Morton looked at Warton. "I suppose we should keep up our strength," he said, "even to the very end." The toads sat together in the empty end chair. The weasels ate in their usual rough and tumble way, trying to get whatever he could for himself. They scooped out the stew without bothering to use spoons. They filled their bowls till they overflowed. It was all Warton and Morton could do to get half a bowl, which they shared. "It's really not bad," said Warton after the first taste. "Ugh, needs salt," grunted Morton. They were still eating when Frida stood on her chair, the other weasels having already finished the very last morsel of stew. "Tonight," screeched Frida, "we're having something new that my assistant told me about. It's called dessert." "Dessert?" asked Fred. "What's dessert?" "It's something you eat after you've finished eating," said Frida. "The toad made it himself." "They're my special wintergreen and raspberry cookies," said Morton. "Well, if dessert means more food," said Fritz, "I'm all for it." He reached for a red cookie. Not bad." "Is that so?" said Frank. "Let me have one." "Sure," said Fritz, and he hurled a green one at Frank. Floyd immediately threw one at Francis. Cookies began sailing across the table in all directions, filling the air, and Morton watched sadly as they smashed against the walls. Finally he got up, trudged across the room, and entered the passageway that led to the garbage and junk room. Warton trudged after him. When Warton stepped inside, he found Morton lying on his pile of rags, staring up at the ceiling. As Warton looked at him, he realized that not once had Morton complained about the predicament they were in, and he wished with all his heart that there was some way he could cheer his brother up. Warton told a little joke and hoped Morton would laugh, but Morton couldn't even smile. "How about singing a couple of songs?" said Warton. Morton shook his head. Warton knew he must do something. His eyes began to blink. They blinked faster and faster. And when they stopped, he started poking about the messy room. When he found an old piece of board, he drew several lines on it with a chunk of charcoal. Then he went into the big room. The weasels, who were either sleeping or arguing or wrestling, paid Warton no attention, and he went along the walls, picking up pieces of red and green cookies, till he had 24 of them. Then he hurried back to the garbage and the junk room. Warton was still lying on the rags with his eyes shut. Warton stood over him. "Care for a game of checkers?" Warton's eyes popped open. "Why," he said, seeing Warton's newly made checkerboard, "that would be very nice." "Okay," said Warton, "and I'll be green, if you don't mind." He began to arrange the cookie pieces on the checkerboard. Before half of the first game was over, Warton could see the gloominess begin to vanish from Warton's face. They were just starting their third game when Fred came in with a load of garbage. He threw the garbage on a pile and went over to Warton and Warton. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "We're playing checkers," replied Warton. "Oh," said Fred. "What's checkers?" "It's a game," said Warton. "Oh," said Fred. "What's a game?" Warton and Warton looked at Fred in amazement. "Don't you know what a game is?" asked Warton. "No," said Fred, "I can't know everything." "Well," said Warton, "it's a bit hard to explain." "Well, then show me," said Fred, pulling up a box and sitting down beside Warton. The Toads could see that Fred would not be satisfied till he knew what the game of checkers was. So Warton let Fred use the green cookies, and Warton played against him with the red cookies. Warton and Warton explained some of the simplest facts about checkers as they played. The game was over very quickly, and Warton won easily. "Now, do you understand?" asked Warton. "Not yet," said Fred. "Let's play another game." "All right," said Warton, and they started playing again. Warton won that game too, but this time it was much closer. Warton could see that Fred was a fast learner, and he seemed to enjoy the game immensely. "Let's play again," said Fred. "All right," agreed Warton, and he and Fred played 4 more games. By then it was growing late. Warton had all he could to keep his eyes open. "I'm sorry," he said with a big yawn, "but I'm just too tired to play anymore." "Oh," said Fred with disappointment. "Well, then I'll just take this game into the big room and play checkers with someone else." As Fred left, Warton lay down on his pile of rags. "Good night, Warton," he said as he shut his eyes, "and thank you for thinking of the checkers." "Good night," said Warton, happy that he had been able to take Warton's mind off their terrible problem for at least a little while. The 2 Toads had been asleep a short time when Fred came tearing into the room. Floyd was right behind him. "Wake up!" shouted Fred. "What's wrong?" asked Warton and Warton together. "I don't know," said Fred, waving the checkerboard in the air. "When I played this game with you, it was fun. I want to know why it wasn't fun when I played with Floyd." "It's because you wouldn't let me have red," said Floyd. "I say it's because you wouldn't let me go first," said Fred. "And I say this game is impossible," said Floyd, giving Fred a shove. In an instant, the 2 weasels were fighting. They rolled through the garbage and junk till they were all tired out. Then they sat glaring at each other. Finally, Fred pointed at Warton and Warton. You 2 play," he demanded. Warton spread out the checkerboard. "Okay, red or green," he said to Warton. And the 2 sleepy Toads played checkers. Every once in a while, Fred poked Floyd and said, "See? See?" Floyd seemed fascinated. As soon as the game was over, he grabbed the checkerboard and ran out of the room, with Fred chasing after him. When the weasels had gone, Warton and Warton just shook their heads and went back to sleep. And that is the end of our chapter. Goodbye, boys and girls. I'll see you tomorrow.